In the hallowed halls of the House Financial Services Committee chamber, an electric tension gripped the air, a suffocating silence descending as all eyes locked onto the brewing storm. A seismic political clash loomed on the horizon, one that would shatter perceptions of young black leadership in Congress and leave Byron Donalds reeling in disbelief. Donalds, a Republican prodigy, had just unleashed a scathing attack on newcomer Jasmine Crockett, accusing her of peddling victim politics instead of serving her constituents with real solutions. Yet, Crockett remained unshaken, a cryptic, almost mythic smirk curling her lips, as if she had long awaited this precise moment of reckoning. Armed with a Harvard MBA and polished conservative rhetoric, Donalds thought he could dismantle the former public defender with ease, oblivious to the brutal truth awaiting him. Never underestimate a warrior tempered by the fires of relentless courtroom warfare. This was no ordinary congressional session. It was a ferocious clash of opposing visions for black political leadership, a gladiatorial showdown where only one would emerge with their honor unscathed. Cameras captured every second, C-SPAN streamed the drama live, and social media stood poised for the explosion, as neither Donalds nor Crockett could predict they were about to ignite the most explosive congressional moment of the year. Byron Donalds stormed into Congress in 2021, a man seemingly fated for glory. At 44, the Florida representative epitomized the conservative archetype, a Harvard-educated MBA, a thriving insurance mogul, and one of just two black Republicans in the House. Fox News heralded him as a champion. Conservative benefactors poured resources into his rise, and murmurs of presidential aspirations trailed him like a shadow. Donalds had built a fearsome reputation for slicing through progressive Democrats with surgical precision. His financial expertise made him a powerhouse on the Financial Services Committee, where he waged war against what he branded as woke banking policies and socialist economic schemes. Eloquent, always prepared, and rarely rattled, he seemed invincible. Yet, beneath this polished exterior lay a fatal flaw. He had never crossed paths with a force like Jasmine Crockett. Donald's ascent to power was cushioned by privilege. Post-Harvard, he climbed the ranks of finance and insurance, amassing wealth while many in his future district struggled to survive. His congressional journey was a smooth ride, backed by Republican heavyweights who saw him as the face of black conservatism. He was used to dominating every room, always the most brilliant mind at the table. Now, facing Crockett across the committee chamber, Donalds radiated unshakable confidence. He had crafted a meticulous assault on her voting history, her so-called radical policies, and her past as a public defender. In his mind, this was a guaranteed victory, another progressive Democrat to be put in her place with minimal effort. Jasmine Crockett, however, was forged in a crucible of adversity, her path to Congress a saga of unyielding grit. At 42, the Dallas native had clawed her way through a world rife with prejudice and skepticism as a black woman from the South. Each barrier only steeled her determination. Far from a typical freshman congresswoman, Crockett was a battle-hardened criminal defense attorney who had spent over a decade fighting for those unable to pay exorbitant legal fees. She had faced down prosecutors, judges, and hostile juries, securing victories in cases deemed unwinnable. Her razor-sharp ability to think on her feet under crushing pressure was her greatest weapon. Her seat on the Financial Services Committee wasn't a mere stepping stone. Crockett was driven by a visceral conviction that financial policies disproportionately crushed working families, especially communities of color. She had seen predatory lending devastate neighborhoods and unfair foreclosures tear families apart. Issues that were not theoretical to her, but painfully real. What made Crockett a truly dangerous adversary for someone like Donalds was her obsessive preparation. She didn't just glance at briefings. She consumed them. She didn't recite rehearsed lines. She mastered the complex issues at their core. And when cornered, she didn't merely deflect. She struck back with lethal accuracy. This showdown was more than a petty spat between congressional peers. It was a cataclysmic battle between two irreconcilable visions of black political leadership in America. Donald stood for the conservative ethos, individual triumph, personal accountability, and a belief that government aid often crippled the communities it aimed to save. He insisted Black Americans needed no special safeguards or tailored policies, only economic freedom and release from government shackles. Crockett, on the other hand, embodied the progressive fight, systemic overhaul, government action to right historical wrongs, and an unshakable conviction that racism and discrimination still actively oppress Black communities. She argued that without deliberate policies and strict oversight, inequality would only deepen. The political arena watched with bated breath. Republicans saw Donalds as proof their party could win over Black voters, while Democrats viewed Crockett as the future of their movement, youthful, diverse, and fearless in battle. The outcome of this duel would either validate or undermine an entire ideology. Yet, neither grasped the true scale of the impending chaos. This wasn't destined to be a civilized policy debate or a restrained exchange of ideas. This was about to erupt into a brutal political brawl, and only one of them had truly been shaped by the raw, unforgiving streets. The House Financial Services Committee was deep in debate over new community bank regulations when Chairman Patrick McHenry granted Byron Donalds his 5-minute slot. The supposed focus was small business lending rules, but Donalds had a darker motive. He straightened his navy tie, locked eyes with the witness panel, then turned his piercing stare toward his Democratic counterparts. His voice was steady, deliberate, dripping with menace. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," he started. "Before I address our witnesses, I must speak to a troubling undercurrent in this hearing." Committee members snapped to attention, abandoning phones and papers, sensing a shift far beyond mundane policy talk. "We've heard endless rhetoric today about how these banking rules will aid underserved communities," Donald said, his air quotes slicing through the air like daggers. "But I must question whether some of my colleagues on the opposite side truly comprehend what helps communities, or if they're merely chasing political applause." Democrats squirmed in their seats, the atmosphere thickening with dread. Donald's tone grew sharper when I examined the voting records of certain members, especially those claiming to speak for communities like mine. I see a trend of endorsing policies that sound noble in headlines, but ultimately harm the very people they pretend to champion. The attack turned personal, venomous. Democrats exchanged wary looks, trying to pinpoint his prey. Consider their resistance to school choice, their backing of defunding police efforts, or their relentless push for government dependency over job-creating, opportunity-driven policies. He pressed. Representative Maxine Waters tried to cut in, "Mr. Donalds, I'm unsure how this ties to banking regulation." But Donalds barreled forward, undeterred. "It ties directly, Ranking Member Waters, because it exposes a profound ignorance of what Black communities truly need." A chilling hush fell over the room. Donalds had played the race card in a way that unnerved everyone. "I represent a Florida district with large Black and Hispanic populations. I grew up in Brooklyn. I know these communities, and what I see from some colleagues is victim politics, not solutions." His gaze zeroed in on Jasmine Crockett, who had been scribbling notes but now lifted her head, eyebrows arching in quiet defiance. Representative Crockett, for instance, is quick to decry systemic racism in banking, quick to claim financial institutions target Black borrowers. But has she offered any real fixes to boost Black home ownership? Has she supported measures to help Black entrepreneurs secure capital? Crockett set down her pen, leaning forward, her calm facade masking a brewing inferno in her eyes. Donalds doubled down. Or is it simpler to scapegoat racism and discrimination? Is it easier to paint your constituents as helpless victims than to tackle the grueling work of crafting policy? The chamber pulsed with raw tension. Republican members nodded in smug agreement. Democrats sat stunned by Donald's ruthless assault on a fellow Black representative. "Here's my take," Donald said, his voice rising with calculated fervor. "I believe some came to Congress not to serve, but to grandstand, not to solve issues, but to whine about them, not to elevate their communities, but to trap them in cycles of government reliance and victimhood narratives. Representative Al Green attempted a point of order, Mr. Chairman, but McHenry dismissed it with a wave. The gentleman from Florida retains the floor. Donalds flashed a faint, triumphant smirk, convinced he was on the verge of a decisive strike. Representative Crockett speaks loudly about defending working families, but her answer to every challenge is more government, more spending, more regulations that choke the small businesses and community banks serving those families. She was a public defender, which I acknowledge, but defending is about excusing failure. Serving in Congress should be about forging success. The Republican side erupted in applause, conservative social media already igniting with clips of Donalds eviscerating Crockett. Fox News producers likely began scripting their primetime segments. Donalds reclined in his chair, a self-assured grin on his face. He believed he had executed a flawless political ambush, challenging Crockett's competence, integrity, and grasp of her own community, all while maintaining a composed, reasonable demeanor for the cameras. But he overlooked one critical detail. Jasmine Crockett was still there, and her own 5 minutes of retribution were fast approaching. As Donalds wrapped up his tirade, the chamber buzzed with stifled murmurs. Republican aides rushed to cue social media snippets. Democratic staffers fired off urgent texts to their superiors, plotting a counterstrike. Yet Jasmine Crockett sat serene, still jotting notes, occasionally nodding as if absorbing Donald's venom with genuine interest. She wasn't glued to her phone for online reactions or huddling with aides in panic. She showed no outward rage. She was calculating. And for Byron Donalds, that should have been a harbinger of doom. Chairman McHenry glanced at his watch and reviewed his roster. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes. Crockett rose with deliberate grace, adjusted her microphone, and locked eyes with Byron Donalds, her smile now a weapon of legend, promising devastation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is about to get very interesting. The tempest was unleashed, and Byron Donalds had no idea of the cataclysm about to engulf him. Jasmine Crockett took her place at the microphone, radiating the steely poise of a veteran who had faced down countless hostile courtrooms. She had absorbed every barb of Donald's onslaught, and now it was time for her to strike. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate my colleague from Florida for his intriguing critique of my work and my community, she began, her voice clear and unshakable. It's always enlightening to hear someone interpret my district for me, particularly someone who's never set foot there. A few Democrats stifled laughs, but Crockett wasn't fishing for humor. She was building towards something far more lethal. Before I address Representative Donald's doubts about my grasp of Black communities, let's ground ourselves in reality. As a former public defender, I learned that facts outweigh emotions and evidence trumps accusations. Donalds shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Her tone hinted at a counterattack far beyond mere defense. Representative Donalds noted his Brooklyn roots and Harvard MBA, undeniably impressive achievements, Crockett continued, her gaze piercing straight through him. What he omitted is that post-Harvard, he spent much of his career in insurance, aiding firms in denying claims and slashing payouts. Democrats perked up. The air crackled with anticipation. There's no shame in insurance work, but let's be transparent about what that means for community service. While I fought for families losing homes to predatory loans, Representative Donalds aligned with the very companies peddling those toxic deals. Donalds tried to protest. That's inaccurate. I'm not done. Crockett cut him off with unyielding authority, raising a hand. You had your 5 minutes to vilify me. Now I claim mine to counter with truth. Chairman McHenry nodded. The gentlewoman holds the floor. Crockett reached for a folder on her desk, opening it with surgical intent. Since Representative Donalds challenged my impact and dedication to my community, I thought we might review some hard data. She brandished a document like a blade. This report from the Dallas Federal Reserve shows my district, TX30, has seen a 23% surge in small business lending since I took office, the highest in Texas. Republicans shifted uncomfortably. This was no feeble rebuttal. It also reveals community banks in my district boosted lending to Black and Hispanic businesses by 31% over 2 years. Why? Because I collaborated with those banks to cut through federal red tape while safeguarding consumers. Donalds attempted another interruption. Those figures don't. I'm still speaking, Crockett snapped, her voice now edged with steel. You want to debate victim politics versus solutions? Let's discuss solutions. Crockett set the paper down, her stare boring into Donalds with a mix of scorn and righteous fury. Representative Donalds mocked my public defender background as if advocating for the defenseless was a flaw, not a virtue. Let me clarify what that experience really taught me. Her voice swelled, commanding the room's rapt attention. It taught me to spot a tyrant. It taught me to see through lofty rhetoric and elite credentials when someone's clueless beneath the surface. And it taught me to retaliate when someone abuses their power to silence the vulnerable. The room's energy flipped. Democrats sat taller. Republicans grew visibly anxious. Above all, it taught me to come prepared. So when Representative Donalds doubts my connection to my community, I must ask, has he researched me at all? Crockett pulled out a thicker folder, and Donalds visibly squirmed, fidgeting with his pen, eyes darting for an exit. If he'd done his due diligence, he'd know that before Congress, I didn't just defend individuals. I fought for whole communities in class action suits against predatory lenders, securing $50 million in settlements for cheated families. She produced more papers, each a grenade. He'd know I authored the Texas Fair Lending Act, shielding thousands from foreclosure. He'd know I helped launch the Dallas Community Development Fund, funneling over $200 million in loans to minority entrepreneurs. The chamber was deathly quiet, save for Crockett's resonant voice and the relentless shudder of cameras. But what truly galls me about Representative Donalds' assault, she pressed, her tone now laced with barely contained wrath, is that he accuses me of victim politics while playing the victim himself up here. Woe is me, the lone conservative Black Republican. No one gets how tough it is to represent Black communities as a conservative. Crockett was far from finished. You want to talk excuses? Let's dissect your record, Representative Donalds. 3 years in Congress. What have you delivered for Black Floridians? She didn't pause for a reply. You opposed the American Rescue Plan, which poured billions into minority-owned businesses. You rejected infrastructure funding that would have created jobs in Black neighborhoods. You blocked expanded healthcare access that Black families urgently need. Donald stammered, "Those policies, I'm not done yet." Crockett thundered, her voice now a force that dominated the space. You vote against every measure that could uplift Black communities, then dare to lecture me on inadequacy. That's not leadership, Representative Donalds. That's a theatrical stunt. Crockett leaned into her microphone, her voice dropping to a chilling, powerful whisper. What truly disheartens me is this. We're among the few Black members on this committee. We could unite to tackle the real financial struggles of our people. Instead, you opted to personally attack me, questioning my credentials, my intent, and my loyalty to my community. She paused, letting the weight of her words crush the silence before unleashing her final, annihilating strike. And that reveals something to me. It shows you care more about currying favor with your Republican peers than serving Black communities. It shows you're more obsessed with your next Fox News slot than your next legislative win. The room froze. Even staffers' hushed exchanges ceased. So here's my advice, Representative Donalds, Crockett concluded. If you're going to critique my work, come with evidence. If you're going to challenge my impact, showcase your own successes. And if you're going to school me on serving Black communities, perhaps start by voting for policies that actually support them. She collected her papers, fixed Donalds with one last withering look, and delivered her fatal blow. Until then, I recommend you tend to your own district and leave mine to me. Because unlike you, I understand what it means to battle for my people, not perform for yours. She took her seat. A suffocating silence lingered, heavy and oppressive, for what seemed an endless moment. Byron Donalds sat petrified, his face burning red, hands quaking visibly. He parted his lips repeatedly as if to retort, but no sound emerged. Chairman McHenry coughed awkwardly. The committee will take a brief recess. But the carnage was already complete. In under 5 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had not only shielded herself, but obliterated Byron Donalds' standing. And it had all played out on live television. As McHenry called the recess, the chamber exploded into chaos. Democratic aides scrambled for their phones, alerting party leaders to the staggering turn of events. Republican staffers floundered, grasping for a way to spin what was undeniably a catastrophic defeat. Byron Donalds remained rooted to his seat, staring blankly into the void. His normally flawless posture slumped, hands still trembling as he fumbled for his water. Republican allies approached, but he brushed them away. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett was swarmed by awestruck Democrats. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reached her first, exclaiming, "Girl, that was pure fire." Representative Ayanna Pressley echoed, "You just schooled everyone on handling a bully." Yet Crockett held back from revelry. She knew the real war was only igniting. Within moments of the recess, snippets of Crockett's counterstrike flooded the internet. The C-SPAN live stream spread across platforms, with viewers capturing the raw exchange. The first viral clip was Crockett's defiant, "I'm still not finished," as Donalds tried to interject, racking up 50,000 retweets in an hour, with reactions like "that energy," and "this is how you shut down disrespect." But the true viral juggernaut was her closing line. "I suggest you focus on your own district and let me worry about mine, because unlike you, I actually know what it means to fight for my people instead of performing for yours." That clip soared to 100,000 retweets in 2 hours. Hashtags like hashtag Jasmine Crockett destroys Donalds trended nationwide within 3 hours, soon joined by hashtag Jasmine the Boss. Fox News spiraled into damage control. They had intended to spotlight Donald's attack on Crockett as a triumph of conservative black leadership over progressive rhetoric. Instead, they scrambled to mitigate the fallout. Tucker Carlson's team shifted to a vague narrative of black-on-black political conflict, dodging the specifics. Sean Hannity's segment labeled Crockett's response over-emotional and unprofessional. Even conservative audiences weren't buying it. Conservative social media split. Some defended Donalds, claiming he posed valid questions, and Crockett dodged with deflection, but many admitted he was outclassed. A notable conservative voice tweeted, "I support Byron Donalds, but that was brutal. You can't attack someone's record without knowing theirs." Crockett was ready. Liberal social media erupted in celebration. Parallels to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, iconic rebuttals flooded feeds. AOC showed women how to clap back online. One viral post read, "Jasmine Crockett just showed them how to do it face-to-face." MSNBC looped the clips endlessly. Joy Reid's team booked Crockett for an exclusive, and The View scheduled her within hours. Within the Democratic Party, the impact was seismic. Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office issued a statement. Representative Crockett proved today why she's an indispensable voice for working families. Her mastery of facts and fierce defense of her constituents reflect the pinnacle of Democratic leadership. Mainstream media wrestled with framing the spectacle. It was undeniably significant, a dramatic face-off between two rising stars that detonated online. Yet, covering congressional spats demanded depth beyond a viral clip. The Washington Post headlined, "Freshman Democrats' viral rebuttal to GOP attack signals shift in black political leadership." The New York Times explored wider ramifications. Congressional clash exposes fractures in black political leadership. CNN's analysts debated if this heralded a new era of combative congressional politics, agreeing Crockett had turned Republican tactics against her assailant with devastating effect. Behind closed doors in Congress, the reverberations were immediate. Democratic leaders were struck not just by Crockett's delivery, but her exhaustive groundwork. Her command of precise stats, tangible examples, and Donald's voting history earned respect for veterans. Representative James Clyburn, the highest-ranking Black House member, personally congratulated her and invited her to address a leadership event. On the Republican side, strategy shifted. The National Republican Congressional Committee quietly warned members to avoid tangling with Crockett, without ironclad preparation. An anonymous GOP strategist noted, "She's not just clever, she's armed. Come at her unprepared, and she'll make you look like a novice." For Byron Donalds, the aftermath was a merciless reckoning. Within a day, late-night shows mocked his shell-shocked reaction post-Crockett's barrage. Saturday Night Live slated a skit on the Clash for their next episode. Donald's social media team flailed. They tried framing his attack as probing Democratic policy, but the narrative collapsed. Conservative allies, who typically boosted him, went silent. Politico delivered a crushing blow with a fact-check, confirming Crockett's district stats as accurate while exposing Donald's claims about her record as distorted or false. Fox News, once eyeing him for regular spots, scaled back his appearances. An anonymous producer remarked, "He's still a talent, but he must choose fights wisely." This made him seem unprepared. Political observers dissected the broader fallout of the Crockett-Donalds melee. Some saw it as a generational pivot in black political leadership, with younger figures like Crockett refusing to endure critique from black conservatives without retaliation. Others viewed it as a symptom of politics' escalating hostility, where viral moments and online clout often outshone policy or legislative wins. Most critically, it underscored the tightrope black Republicans like Donalds walk. Attacking black Democrats demands finesse. Too timid, and conservative bases doubt their grit. Too harsh, and they risk alienating black communities who see it as betrayal. For Crockett, the viral eruption was a defining breakthrough she had been steadily constructing since entering Congress. Her committee performance proved she wasn't just another rookie Democrat. She was a political titan who could dominate any foe. Democratic fundraisers swarmed to back her future runs. Speaking agencies lined up paid gigs, and publishers pitched book deals. Above all, Crockett solidified her image as unbowed and unbreakable. In a political climate where many Democrats felt perpetually besieged, she demonstrated how to seize the offensive with ruthless precision. The Crockett-Donalds confrontation in the House Financial Services Committee chamber had already set the political world ablaze. But the saga was far from over. As the viral clips of Jasmine Crockett's searing rebuttal continued to dominate social media and news cycles, the tension between her and Byron Donalds only intensified, spilling into new arenas of conflict that further exposed the deep ideological rifts within black political leadership and American politics at large. What began as a single, explosive committee exchange morphed into a series of public challenges and personal barbs, each encounter ratcheting up the stakes and drawing the nation's rapt attention. Months after the initial clash, the feud reignited with a vengeance when Crockett appeared on The Breakfast Club in June 2024, delivering a scathing critique of Donald's perspective on black history. She didn't hold back, questioning whether his views, particularly his controversial remarks suggesting life for black families was better under Jim Crow, stemmed from a lack of historical understanding or were influenced by his interracial marriage. The fact that you're sitting around talking about life was better under Jim Crow, is this because you don't understand history? Or literally because you married a white woman and so you think that whitewashed you? She challenged, her words cutting deep into personal territory. The comment sparked immediate outrage across the political spectrum, with conservatives decrying it as racially divisive and personal. Donalds responded with unyielding fury on the Joe Pags show, demanding that Crockett keep his wife, Erica Donalds, out of the discourse. "Don't talk about my wife. Keep my wife out of this. It ain't got nothing to do with her," he snapped, framing her remarks as emblematic of Democratic hypocrisy on race and personal relationships. He pointed out what he saw as a double standard, noting that interracial marriages of liberal figures like Kamala Harris and Ketanji Brown Jackson were never politicized in the same way. Donalds didn't stop at defending his family. He escalated the conflict by publicly challenging Crockett to a live debate, accusing her of dodging previous opportunities to face him directly. "There were a couple of times on the campaign trail last year where I was booked to be on stage or to be in a debate with Jasmine, and all of a sudden her schedule changed," he taunted. "If she wants to do this, I'm easy to find. I'm 6 feet 2 inches, you can't miss me." The challenge was both a dare and a public relations maneuver, positioning Donalds as unafraid to confront his adversary head-on while simultaneously announcing his candidacy for Florida governor, a historic bid to become the state's first black governor. The question lingered in the air like a storm cloud. Would Crockett accept, or would she sidestep the gauntlet thrown down before her? Crockett, however, was already embroiled in a whirlwind of additional controversies that threatened to overshadow her earlier triumph over Donalds. In early 2025, she faced a barrage of criticism for a series of inflammatory remarks that painted her as a lightning rod for conservative ire. During a pro-LGBTQ benefit dinner, she referred to Texas Governor Greg Abbott as Governor Hot Wheels, a comment widely interpreted as mocking his wheelchair-bound condition following a tragic accident at age 26. The backlash was swift and bipartisan, with even some liberal commentators condemning the apparent insensitivity. President Trump himself weighed in, branding Crockett a low-life and very low IQ person during an interview. Crockett refused to apologize, insisting the remark was not about Abbott's disability, but a critique of his policies on migrant transfers to black-led communities. "I wasn't thinking about the governor's condition. I was thinking about the planes, trains, and automobiles he used to transfer migrants," she clarified on social media, though her history of similar rolling references to Abbott undermined her defense for many critics. The same week, Crockett drew further scrutiny for comments perceived as inciting violence against conservative figures like Ted Cruz, suggesting he needed to be knocked over the head, like hard, and for dismissing concerns over transgender inclusion in women's sports as a distraction during an interview with the 19th. These missteps led to calls for censure from Texas Republican Representative Randy Weber and harsh rebukes from the White House, which labeled her an unhinged Democrat inciting violence. Amid this firestorm, her past remarks about Donald's marriage resurfaced, amplifying the narrative of Crockett as a polarizing figure who often crossed lines of decorum. Conservative outlets like Fox News seized on the chaos, with panelists accusing her of embodying Democratic racism and inconsistency on racial issues. Yet, Crockett remained defiant, doubling down on her critiques of Republican policies and figures. In a November 2024 House committee meeting, she fiercely defended diversity, equity, and inclusion (DEI) initiatives against a Republican bill titled Dismantle DEI, calling out what she saw as hypocrisy among multiple white Republican men claiming oppression. "I didn't bring race into anything. They did and always do, and then they twist history and dilute the definition of words," she posted on social media, later taking to CNN to criticize the lack of diversity in Trump's cabinet and the positioning of black Republicans like Donalds and Tim Scott. Her unapologetic stance continued to rally her base, with liberal supporters praising her as a fearless truth-teller who refused to be silenced by conservative outrage or party pressure. For Donalds, the ongoing feud with Crockett became a dual-edged sword. While it kept him in the spotlight as he launched his gubernatorial campaign, it also risked alienating swing voters who questioned his focus on personal attacks over substantive policy discussions. His base reveled in his combative style, especially his debate challenge to Crockett, but the broader public remained divided on whether his rhetoric advanced or hindered his image as a serious contender for Florida's highest office. Meanwhile, Crockett's viral moments, both her initial committee takedown and subsequent controversies, solidified her as a Democratic firebrand, though at the cost of potential censure and strained relations with moderates in her own party. The deeper battle between Crockett and Donalds transcended their personal animosity. It became a microcosm of the larger war over who speaks for Black America in an era of fractured political identities. Donalds, as a leading Black Republican in the MAGA sphere, positioned himself as a champion of conservative values, individual responsibility, and economic freedom, while accusing Crockett of perpetuating victimhood narratives. Crockett, conversely, framed her progressive stance as a necessary fight against systemic inequities, casting Donalds as out of touch with the lived realities of Black communities and beholden to white conservative interests. Their clashes, from the committee room to public airwaves, underscored a generational and ideological divide that neither side could easily bridge. As the dust settled on each fiery exchange, the political landscape felt the tremors. Crockett's ability to turn attacks into viral victories inspired other Democrats to adopt her combative, well-prepared style, while Republicans grew wary of engaging her without airtight strategies. Donalds, despite setbacks, leveraged the conflict to bolster his profile among conservative hardliners. Though he faced the daunting task of proving he could recover from public humiliations like the committee debacle. The nation watched, captivated and polarized, as these two titans continued their war of words and ideals, each skirmish a reminder of the high stakes in a divided America. What comes next remains uncertain. Will Crockett accept Donald's debate challenge, risking further controversy but potentially cementing her dominance in direct confrontation? Can Donalds pivot from personal grievances to policy wins in his gubernatorial bid? Or will his feud with Crockett define his public image? One truth stands clear. Their rivalry has reshaped political discourse, proving that in the age of social media and raw, unfiltered clashes, traditional metrics of power, seniority, credentials, or party loyalty pale against the force of preparation, authenticity, and sheer willpower. Neither Crockett nor Donald will back down easily, and their next encounter promises to be as explosive as the last, with the eyes of a nation waiting to see who will land the final blow.